inviting all the people from the outside to join on.
Good afternoon. Welcome to session 6 of the International Leadership Conference 2021, Perspectives of the Americas. I'm Cheryl Wettstein, a retired journalist and senior advisor to the International Media Association for Peace, or IMAP, and I'm your moderator for today's panel. IMAP, by the way, is one of 8 peace-building associations created under the umbrella of the Universal Peace Federation, which was founded in 2005 and is now an NGO in general consultative status with the United Nations Economic and Social Council. The focus of our ILC panel today, or the ILC in general, is the path to a peaceful reunification of the Korean Peninsula. And the focus of our session will look at the role of news media in assisting in this historical task. We have 5 distinguished media representatives today from Brazil, Peru, Nicaragua, and the United States. I will introduce each speaker before they give their remarks, and afterwards we will have a question and answer period, so please post any questions you have in the chat area. Our first speaker is Mr. Tom McDivitt. He's chairman of the Washington Times in DC. He's chairman of the company's board of directors. Mr. McDivitt has been with the Times since 1994 and held quite a few high-level business positions in the company. In recent years, he was appointed by Dr. Hak Jahan Moon, the co-founder of the Times and also UPF, as chairman of the new H.J. Magnolia Global Foundation and H.J. Magnolia USA. This is a corporate group of 46 companies in Korea, Japan, and the United States. Mr. McDivitt also serves as the global coordinator of both IMAP and a sister association, the International Association for Peace and Economic Development. Mr. McDivitt, welcome to our panel, and you have the floor.
Thank you very much, Cheryl. Can you hear me okay? Good. It's a delight to be here. Ladies and gentlemen, a special honor to join such an accomplished panel of media experts from North and South America. Special thanks to Reverend Shin and Dr. Jenkins and all the organizers who put these programs together. We're focused today on how to bring about the peaceful reunification of the Korean Peninsula and explore media responsibilities in the Asia-Pacific region. I should point out that just as we're holding this seminar today, there's been 8 or 9 programs going on yesterday into tomorrow and the next day, not only in the Western Hemisphere, but also in Asia, as well as in Europe and Africa. We're very serious about pulling thought leaders together on this issue from all over the world, and as Cheryl said, from various different disciplines. You know, it seems that our era is overcome with a multidimensional, critical set of challenges. The COVID-19 pandemic has wreaked havoc and suffering throughout the world. Social norms have been disrupted, and as you all know very well, there are numerous other critical challenges facing every country, not the least of which is the rising concerns about China and, of course, the Korean Peninsula. The big changes moving from a dominant Atlantic-centered civilization to an Asia-Pacific civilization on the global level. So our world is experiencing huge disruption. How we view these challenges is therefore so vital as journalists and as consumers of news and as people who are messengers and influencers in our own right. Our perspective, our worldview, our point of view. And as journalists, it's vital to seek what is most essential in order to report the news with accuracy, fairness, and relevance. And that's what I'd like to talk about, the perspective of our time, the era we're in. We should seek to understand those grand currents that drive our time, this changing era. What's underneath it? As Peter Drucker, the great grandfather of modern day management, said in his book, The Effective Executive, it's vital for leaders to know thy time, know the nature of the time we're in. And we see fundamental changes occurring. I think back to 1976, when Ronald Reagan made a great famous speech about this is a time for choosing. And in that sense, around the world, it really is that. All of us as citizens and as professionals have to look at what's going on and choose a course of action. Well, in my 48 years of learning from and working with Reverend Dr. Sun Myung Moon and his wife, Dr. Hak Jahan Moon, their insights, their guidance, their scholarship, and their work on the nature of our historical era is singularly profound. For example, Reverend Moon predicted the end of the Soviet Union long before the Berlin Wall came down in the mid-1980s. Speaking before some 80 members of the US Congress several years ago, Dr. Hak Jahan Moon said, "We look at this world and see unspeakable, inarticulate misery happening all over the globe. This is impossible to solve with mere human power. What should we do from here on forward?" she said. "We should start a movement that once again attends God as the original owner of the universe in our families, countries, and world. However, the reality is that although our hearts are eager to have that mindset, it's very hard to practice. That's why we need to work together." What impresses me about that point, and she shares it everywhere she goes, is that the problems we're facing, including the Korean Peninsula and the whole set of issues involving geopolitical matters, are not going to be possible to solve with just conventional thinking. We need a higher, more enlightened way of thinking, and we need to rely upon the Creator. In the face of so many challenges in our nations, our communities, and our homes, even in our own personal lives, I think we're witnessing a phenomenon not unlike a great global awakening that requires a new mindset, an enlightened grand strategy, and new leadership, especially the leadership that women provide, which is what's so fascinating about Dr. Hak Jahan Moon. I encourage you to learn about her, pay attention, get her memoir. She's a remarkable woman that's making global impact. As the evangelical historian and philosopher Os Guinness likes to say, contrast is the mother of clarity. When the world seems so dark, the emerging light of a new view of life centered on the highest ideals of true love that transcend the barriers of race, religion, culture, and national boundaries is now becoming more evident with each passing day. A new culture is emerging. It's a new view of reality taking root, and that's the stuff that we as journalists need to be watching for. New trends that are newsworthy to tell the world where we can find real hope and opportunity. Again, hearkening back to Ronald Reagan, he used to like to say, let's focus on what works. Well, what about the role of media and the launching of this new association, the International Media Association for Peace? All the way back in 1978, Dr. Moon spoke about to the World Media Conference that more than ever before, the pen is mightier than the sword. He said, "I've always believed that the media must be free and that a free press must also be a responsible press, and that a responsible press is a moral press." Well, what do I mean by moral press? He said, a moral media is society's conscience. I was just looking at a YouTube of Jordan Peterson, Dr. Jordan Peterson yesterday, who talked about the imminent decline of the mainstream media, even that it'll disappear because of the emergence of social media and the ability of so many people without huge corporations to get meaningful messages out. Let's remember the moral media has to be driven by conscience, and stressing the important mission of the press as a defender of democracy, freedom, and world peace by virtue of its watchdog roles on the legislative, judicial, and executive branches. Together, they founded the Sakai Nipo in 1975, and later other media outlets, including the Washington Times in 1982, which has become one of America's most influential news media enterprises. Just about a year ago, the Simmons Research Company examined the nature of trustworthiness in modern media in America in the major companies. And we're proud to say the Washington Times came out as the 5th most reliable and trustworthy newspaper enterprise and the 10th overall media company. In February of 2020, as a key aspect of the World Summit 2020, which attracted some 550 journalists from over 70 countries, we launched this IMAP network, and now it's in 140 countries around the world. It's fantastic. We encourage you to be involved. At Mother Moon's behest, it was launched with a mission to address the current crises in media credibility, media standards and ethics, and the seemingly never-ending industry upheavals and innovations. IMAP also seeks to provide professional development and networking opportunities to media practitioners around the world. We'll encourage the development of a responsible global media industry that's highly trusted, independent, and prosperous, and accessible to all. And as the piece in the IMAP name suggests, there's also a strong desire to encourage news media to shine a light on dialogue, collaboration, conflict resolution, and most of all, solutions as a way of promoting human development, God-given human rights, social well-being, freedom, and prosperity. Especially as we drill into the issue of how to resolve the Korean Peninsula and its potential to be a gateway for a whole new economic boom in the world, starting in Asia, balancing the issues of China, working with the allies of the Western world. It's so vital that as media professionals, we pay attention to these types of topics. And that's why we invite all of you in your own countries and regions to participate with the International Media Association for Peace, contribute your talent, passion, and energy and wisdom, make a difference in the media profession for the sake of peace, unity, freedom, and happiness of all people. We look together to partner with your companies and work to bring new voices to the fore. And with that, I want to thank you very much for this opportunity and wish you all the very best. Stay healthy, and God bless you and your families. Thank you so much. Back to you, Cheryl.
You bet. Thank you, Mr. McDivitt. It is really true to know thine own time. The media has changed. It's just literally gone inside out over the last many decades. And with North Korea, South Korea, we have been working on this since 1953. And it's clear that we need new ideas. And it's very exciting to hear that there is an effort to pull together thought leaders just on this topic, and then to rope in the media through IMAP. So these are all very exciting and encouraging dimensions. And I'm glad you were able to bring them to us, Mr. McDivitt. Our next speaker is Dr. Sergio De Avazero Redo. And he is president of Sao Paulo Press Association, which was founded in 1933 and is considered Brazil's palace of the press. Dr. Redo is also vice president of the prestigious National Press Federation in Brazil, and he is the presenter on a weekly television show called National Press Room. And in addition to his work in the media, Dr. Redo is also a lawyer, a business administrator, a university teacher, writer, and a very busy man, obviously. So welcome, Dr. Redo, and you have the floor. Thank you.
You're welcome. Boa tarde a todos. É uma honra estarmos falando aqui de São Paulo, do Brasil, a exatamente 15 horas e 13 minutos, dia 29 de abril de 2021. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Eu vou procurar ser extremamente atencioso, com o máximo respeito. Vou tentar ler aqui o meu discurso em espanhol. Damas y caballeros, me siento muy honrado de ser inventado por la Federación para la Paz Universal para hablar en esta importante conferencia internacional, liderazgo, sobre el tema de la reunificación pacífica de la península de Corea. Hablo en esta importante conferencia como miembro de la Asociación Internacional de Medios de Comunicaciones por la Paz, presidente de la Asociación de Prensa de São Paulo, vice-presidente de la Federación Nacional de Prensa, FENAI, y como embajador de la paz de la Federación de la Paz Universal. En primer lugar, quiero agradecer al doctor Thomas Walsh, presidente de la Federación de la Paz Universal, y al doctor Simón Faraboli, presidente de la UPF en Brasil y secretario general de la UPF en América del Sur. Comencemos nuestras palabras contemplando uno de los mayores desejos del ser humano, que es promover la justicia. Sin embargo, la justicia solo puede reconocerse a través de un proceso de estabilidad democrático o del Estado democrático de derecho, que solo se logra si hay paz. La justicia y la paz sobreviven como hermanas siamesas. Si realmente queremos hacer justicia, después de décadas de injusticias contra el hombre, cuyo mayor desejo en vida fue promover la paz y la justicia social. Debemos comenzar reconhecendo sua contribuição à la paz e la reunificação da Península de Coreia. Me refiro ao criador da Federação de la Paz Universal, el reverendo Dr. Song Myung-moon, el padre del maior desejo e el maior trabalho realizado por la União Pacífica de la Península de la Coreia. E por ironia e afã do destino, a UPF, através de sua cumbre internacional, liderada por sua amada esposa, a doutora Hak Ja-moon, a quem todos conhecem como a Madre de la Paz, seguida de todos seus diretores, embajadores por la paz e miles de seguidores em mais de 190 países, estão promoviendo actualmente el acercamiento diplomático y los intereses comunes de ambas as Coreias. Y esto se hace para declarar que ha llegado el momento de concentrar todas as mejores energias centradas en esta antigua península asiática para afirmar que os pueblos de las duas Coreias não aceitam viver separado. É inhumano saber que, aunque provenientes de la míster raiz histórica, que vêm obrigados a aceitar a separação, incluso faltar ao respeito e suas antigas costumbres, cultura, crenças, valores e língua. Estes interesses só surgem de sua vontade, sino de foram impostos por líderes tirânicos que nunca foram pacificadores. Esta imposição se ha realizado com ódio e ressentimento que se viene dando desde há mais de 70 anos. Ninguém rente el su sono juízo quiero para si mesma. Nadie quer alimentar-se a divisão dentro de si mesmo. E todos sabem que a divisão nunca estará a presença em los que temem a Dio. Porque em la palavra sagrada está escrito que todos, sean uno, e abra solo rebanho e solo pastor. Creio que é reverendo Moon e sua esposa han repetir estas palavras 1000 de vezes. El mundo necessita de Deus, necessita entender a Deus e sua vontade. Deus se manifiesta onde há unidade e harmonia. Por lógico, donde há divisão, há guerra. Então, é o opuesto a Deus que los se manifesta. En la unión reside el poder y la grandeza. Esto es cierto para el individuo, la familia, la sociedad y para una nación. No debemos estar divididos porque la división nos hace más pequeños, nos hace infelices, sufridos, nos separa unos de otros, internamente en nuestro ser y externamente en la sociedad, contrario a todos los principios de vida relevantes en nuestro peso por la tierra. Ele passo por la tierra, perdones. No creio que este evento, se para hablar de tratado de paz ou el fim del ódio que divide las Coreias, pero é para nós pensar em como chegamos a este estado de conflito e divisão. De onde vem esta desconstrução humana? De onde vêm as guerras, os conflitos? E estou também em Reverendo Moon ha dado a resposta quando disse que o mal está dentro de nós e su no lo combatemos dentro de nós, se esparcirá a nosso alrededor. Se, como todo indica, a UPF é o movimento que está marcando a diferença para solidificar a paz em el mundo, começando por los indivíduos, las famílias, la sociedade e las naciones. Então, esse é o momento que criemos um grupo de trabalho global e centrado em los princípios de independência, prosperidade mútua e valores universais, com partidos e aportos soluções compartidos e aportar soluções a todos os problemas que afetam o planeta Terra. Creio que na llegado este momento e há a bandeira izada por la UPF, é bandeira que marcará o direcionamento em todo o mundo. Depois de tudo, uma das lições da história em que não devemos repetir fórmulas que não funcionaram. É hora de cambiar o paradigma. É hora de desejar que Deus guie, dirija a humanidade, algo que sempre deveria haver sucedido. Graças novamente por la oportunidade de representar a mi gran país, o Brasil, e esta Confederação Internacional de Literatos. Deus los bendito a todos. Muitas gracias.
Thank you, Dr. Ado. Thank you so much. It is wonderful to hear that indeed someone else with all of your experience is saying we cannot repeat the same formulas that have not worked. And thank you also for reminding us that God is a very important personage in the minds of billions of people in the world and should not be forgotten as we try to solve intractable problems, so to speak. Thank you very much, and also for pointing out that UPF is established to help us accomplish. So our next speaker is Mr. Walter Echeverria. He is director of the Vision Actual, a magazine in Lima, Peru. Mr. Echeverria has more than 30 years experience in telecommunications and broadcasting systems and has created many magazines, including Vision Actual. At the National University of Engineering in Peru, and due to his passion for education, he has received several honors for contributing to youth education, social and family support, and NGO work that was done in remote parts of Peru. In addition to his leadership at Vision Actual, Mr. Echeverria is General Manager of Promotion of Events in Science Television and Operations Manager of UA Consults SAC. Welcome, Mr. Echeverria. You have the floor.
Muchas gracias. Muchas gracias. Hablamos de acá representando a Perú, Latinoamérica, Sudamérica, sobre responsabilidades de los medios de comunicación en Asia-Pacífico. La guerra de Corea terminó ya hace 70 años que se inició esta guerra, la llamada Guerra Fría, que realmente llegamos a una conclusión con una firma simplemente de suspensión al fuego. Toda esta situación que se creó para la división de las Coreas, hoy en día Corea del Sur y del Norte, que hoy día distanciados de sus familias, distanciados de sus tradiciones que tenían, separados de ellos por esta Guerra Fría, los medios de comunicación tienen un papel muy importante. Y creo que ellos son los indicados para dar las noticias, los eventos, toda la situación que se viene avanzando sobre la reunificación de la península de Corea. Los medios de comunicación se están realizando por intermedio del IMAP a nivel mundial. En el caso nuestro de Perú, con la presidencia del doctor Trevo de la UPF, estamos avanzando cada vez más con la información y de los acontecimientos que van avanzando en diferentes países con la voluntad de lograr esa tan esperada reunificación. Tanto Estados Unidos, China, Japón, Rusia, creo que todos tienen la voluntad ya de poner fin, digamos, a esta separación de 70 años. Para este motivo, los medios de comunicación, sean medios escritos, sean medios televisivos, radiales, tienen una función muy importante como un gran apoyo a esta gran reunificación que tanto esperamos. El trabajo incansable del reverendo Moon y su esposa, la doctora Jajaja, han llevado a cabo durante muchos años, luchando, perseguidos, expulsados, pero ellos siempre adelante para tratar de lograr apaciguar y lograr la paz. Esa paz que promueve la UPF a nivel del mundo, mediante congresos, mediante encuentros, mediante liderazgo y todos los eventos que viene realizando la UPF, se está logrando poco a poco afianzar y poco a poco convencer a los países que la reunificación tiene que darse en el tiempo más corto posible para que la Corea sea una gran potencia en forma unificada. En ese sentido, se está programando con el IMAP de la OPF a nivel mundial, con los grandes expertos, para llegar al mismo sitio de Corea del Norte, con Corea del Sur, a Pyongyang y con Seúl, hacer esa unificación de eventos para lograr que poco a poco ese acercamiento que necesita Corea para lograr su recuperación se dé ya en ese camino. Y los medios de comunicación tenemos que lograrlo con ese apoyo de cada país, con sus medios, con sus televisoras, con su radio, todo, difundir, promover, sensibilizar esa unión que tanto se espera, y creo que hoy en día todo el mundo esperamos que la única división que existe en el mundo de un país son Corea. Yo creo que ya es hora, y nosotros, en conjunto con los medios, creemos que ya es tiempo de lograr ese ansiado, esa esperanza que tienen los habitantes de Corea del Sur con Corea del Norte para lograr esa reunificación que va a ser un ejemplo para el mundo y un ejemplo para lograr esa paz tan esperada. Y todos creemos que ya se debe dar en el tiempo más corto esta gran reunificación. Esa es la parte de los medios que debemos poner la fuerza cada vez de cada país, de cada pueblo, hacer los eventos, motivando, afianzando, educando, de que ya no puede haber una separación de un país, ni dividirlo, porque las potencias ya están reflexionando también. Y creemos que eso ya tiene que darse, y por eso estamos en esa lucha incansable. Por ese motivo, desde Perú decimos, la reunificación está en camino y se va a dar. Muchas gracias.
Thank you, Mr. Echeverria. Yes, you're stressing the important point that media has in getting into this issue with the reunification of Korea and mobilizing information pathways through all of the massive amounts of communications we have today, such as television and radio and papers, magazines, and social media. And all of these countries we're talking about in the Far East, of course, Asia Pacific, are all very tuned in. So there's a lot of hope for media role within Asia Pacific. So our next speaker is Mr. Guy Taylor. He is the National Security Team Leader at the Washington Times. Mr. Taylor is an award-winning correspondent who oversees the Times coverage at the State Department, the Pentagon, and the entire intelligence community. He has frequently appeared on places like C-SPAN and in other current events news shows. And one of his more notable honors was a 2012 Virginia Press Association Award for his great series on political, economic, and security developments in Mexico. Personal pleasure, and we're very glad to have you here, Mr. Taylor. You have the floor.
Thank you so much. Can you hear me okay? Yes.
Very clear.
Thank you to the Universal Peace Federation and the International Leadership Conference for having me. I'd really like to just offer a few remarks from my perspective as a USA, Washington, D.C. based international affairs journalist who's made many visits to the Asia Pacific and reported extensively on a range of issues there, including in Northeast Asia on issues pertaining to North Korea and China, South Korea, Japan. What I believe to be key pillars of responsibility for both government-sponsored, but also especially private and nonprofit news media and communication companies in the region, as well as those that cover the region from outside, whether it's anywhere in the Western Hemisphere or from the United States. One of the primary pillars is to promote and maintain awareness that free market democratic societies should tolerate and not be intimidated by the presence of free media spaces that are full of political opposition and critical debate or criticism of government leadership. Healthy free market democracies should be promoting and appreciating a healthy amount of freedom in the media space. What I'm talking about specifically are the diverse mix of independent media of many different political leanings across the print, radio, and television landscapes. Of course, all of it online in South Korea and Japan, with regard to Northeast Asia specifically, but then in the Philippines and in Indonesia and other nations with regard to the rest of the Asia Pacific. Free media in these countries, I believe, has a vital role and really a responsibility to promote an understanding and an appreciation for how very different the media spaces are in China or North Korea that are controlled tightly by the authoritarian apparatus of the state. It follows that media in democratic societies of the Asia Pacific must continue to retain the right of private ownership and must also promote awareness of propaganda infiltrating the international information space, often masquerading as news generated and projected by authoritarian, government-controlled, or government-owned media, most notably from China, but also very much from North Korea and from Russia. The pillar of media freedom, if we can call it that, this pillar beneath the whole landscape of media. This is what separates freedom-loving and freedom-appreciating societies of the Asia Pacific from authoritarianism. And the implications of this are big because they reach well beyond the news media and into the cultural, artistic, and of course, even the religious space as well. My overarching point here is that anyone working in the free media space in the Asia Pacific should be aware and should be open to promoting an awareness of what the alternatives to that free media space are. And the alternatives I'm talking about are the authoritarian spaces where no criticism of those in power is tolerated and where ownership of information, ideas, politics, and culture are concentrated into a very small number of authoritarian hands. The second primary pillar I want to address is the pillar of conscientiousness that I believe media in the Asia Pacific and anywhere around the world really should have towards civil political discourse. Just because the media space supports freedom and freedom of debate and criticism, that should not be an excuse for crass or base or racist or insulting rhetoric, or an opening for exploitation by radical elements of a given society. This is a point that can be delicate and debatable in democratic society. But I think based on my own experience working in the US media now for more than 20 years, and several of those years for the Washington Times newspaper in Washington, DC, I believe conscientiousness to civil political discourse is a goal that should be pursued by all societies and is especially important to democracies, which are notoriously messy and intrinsically prone to political upheaval and rebirth as a matter of practice. Finally, I'd like to say just a few points on what I believe is the need for in the Asia Pacific to push for openings of coverage, information, and communications, both with China and North Korea. While the government of China tolerates a limited presence of foreign media, it has flirted with eradicating that presence in recent years, particularly with regard to major US news organizations. And I think everyone should be wary of that and should stand up for the need for foreign media to continue to be allowed to report from inside China, including all over the country, such as in Wuhan, where the COVID-19 pandemic is believed to have begun, but also in Xinjiang, where the US government has accused Chinese authorities of carrying out genocide against Muslims and ethnic minorities. Beijing claims these accusations are baseless. Well, it should allow outside journalists into those areas then. With regard to North Korea, the whole world might benefit from more coordination among free media companies, not only from Asia Pacific, but also from the West, that could be working more effectively together to petition the North Korean government to hold conferences, inviting foreign media into the country, if only to create a basic opening for on-the-ground coverage, as well as some civil society dialogue between Pyongyang and the rest of the world that has been stifled in recent years. I know this may sound like a lofty idea, but it's something to hope for. I'll conclude by saying how much I appreciate the media space in the Asia Pacific and how much I and others in the US media rely upon free English language streams of information in the region. Although I, like just about everyone else participating here today, am also very excited about the prospect of one day, hopefully soon, being able to travel to the region again. And with that, I'd like to just thank you very much again for having me. It's an honor to participate in an event like this. And I think these are very important, very weighty topics, particularly with regard to conscientiousness toward civil debate and political debate. Thank you.
That's right. Thank you, Mr. Taylor. You just provide such frontline journalism advice on what other people can hear and put into practice. The fact that the media can be conscientious, so a little bit more civil in the way that it addresses hot button political things. Understanding how we are different and that the freedom-loving media needs to stand up for itself and not forget that there are other kinds of media that are struggling to just be independent and fair and accurate. You made so many good points there. And I really like the one about North Korea, petitioning them to please, let's have some conferences in your cities. And also being able to go into certain places in China, which have just horrifying news apparently coming out of them. We need to know more. So thank you very much. And our last speaker for today's panel is Mrs. Yesenia del Rosario Cortez Martinez. She is the general manager of VOS TV in Managua, Nicaragua. Prior to her management appointment, which I think was just a year or two ago, she worked as a news anchor, a journalist, a producer, and a director of content and programming. She studied communication sciences at the Universidad del Valle in Nicaragua. She has a master's degree in corporate social responsibility with a focus on human rights from the American University, UAM. We're delighted to have you on our panel today, Ms. Cortez, and you have the floor.
Distinguidos representantes de medios de comunicación, damas y caballeros, me siento honrada de dirigirme a ustedes en este evento y unirme a esta iniciativa sobre la responsabilidad de los medios de comunicación en Asia-Pacífico. Sabemos que hay muchos retos y desafíos y el papel de los medios es clave en este proceso. Agradezco a UPF Internacional y UPF Capítulo Nicaragua por la oportunidad de compartir en esta sesión parte del trabajo que venimos realizando en Voz TV, un medio de comunicación que promueve el orgullo nicaragüense, el talento y la cultura de nuestro país, con la generación de contenidos de calidad que entretengan e informen de manera responsable. Somos conscientes de que además de estar en nuestra posición como medios de comunicación, nos convierte en un actor privilegiado para el cambio positivo y de que podemos sensibilizar a través de nuestros medios de televisión y plataformas digitales. Desde nuestros inicios, hemos tenido claro que los medios deben de estar ajustados a códigos de ética. Igualmente, siempre contamos con la voluntad de asesorarnos y de realizar alianzas con entidades especializadas con el fin de empoderar a la audiencia con información y entretenimiento de calidad ajustados a nuestra realidad. En Voz TV estamos convencidos que además de generar valor para la empresa, tenemos el deber y la responsabilidad de generar valor para la sociedad y contribuir positivamente a su progreso. Creemos que esa reflexión y esa emoción son palancas que pueden ayudar a un cambio positivo en el entorno que nos rodea. Es por eso que en nuestra televisora trabajamos con un enfoque responsable de forma transversal con todos los programas, incluyendo la parte digital. En un momento donde el mundo está viviendo tiempos difíciles, nuestro compromiso se hace más fuerte ante el dolor, la incertidumbre, las enfermedades, la angustia, desesperanza, el terrorismo, la desintegración familiar, el cibercrimen, el cambio climático, la inseguridad alimentaria, la desigualdad, los conflictos sociales y políticos, entre otros. Nuestro rol como medio de comunicación es ofrecer contenido que contribuya a un mundo mejor, a fortalecer valores de convivencia, respeto, tolerancia, unidad, solidaridad y promover una cultura de paz a través de nuestros contenidos. Es por ello que en 2020 tuvimos la experiencia de llevar a través de las pantallas de Voz TV Rally de la Esperanza, un evento que busca promover un mundo más pacífico y próspero, que ha sido de mucha bendición para las familias del mundo. Cada expositor contribuye a ese mensaje de paz, amor, fraternidad, ese deseo de unificar la península de Corea. Trabajar enfocados al cumplimiento de los objetivos de desarrollo sostenible nos ha permitido lograr ese triple impacto en nuestros programas, en lo social, en lo económico y en lo ambiental. En estos años nos hemos dado cuenta que no solo basta predicarlos hacia afuera. Lo más importante es que nuestros colaboradores que hacen parte de este contenido lo interioricen y estén convencidos que trabajar bajo estos lineamientos es la mejor contribución que podemos hacer para un mundo mejor. Para ello hemos venido trabajando con un enfoque más humano, transparente y de formación continua. Hoy más que nunca, los medios de comunicación juegan un papel muy importante para el fortalecimiento de la democracia de un país, construir sociedades sólidas y respetuosas con el entorno. Sin embargo, estos temas requieren de la colaboración de cada uno de nosotros. Para resolver los problemas globales, lo que pasa en una comunidad impacta en el resto de las naciones. No estamos aislados y la naturaleza constantemente se encarga de hacérnosla saber de manera evidente. El mundo de hoy está pasando por muchos problemas políticos, económicos y ambientales, y coincidimos que todos queremos alcanzar la solución de todos esos problemas, pero es solo cuando reconocemos que Dios es el creador, podemos creer que la paz es posible. Hay mucho optimismo sobre las perspectivas de reunificación de la península de Corea y el papel que desempeña la UPF para lograr ese sueño. En un mundo de tantos cambios y con tantos avances tecnológicos, vale la pena educar en valores para construir sociedades más justas, más humanas. Los medios de comunicación estamos llamados para lograr ese desafío, cuidar mucho lo que se muestra en pantalla, en este caso televisión, lo que se dice, lo que se escribe y cómo se dice. Estamos convencidos de eso en Voz TV. Debemos de ser responsables para construir puentes y no paredes. Es imprescindible contar con la difusión, no solo de los problemas, sino también de visibilizar soluciones posibles y buenas prácticas de otras naciones que nos inspiren como sociedades a seguir adelante. Todos podemos generar cambios en nuestro entorno. Con fe y esperanza podemos lograr lo impensable si ponemos a Dios en el centro de nuestra vida, familia, trabajo y país. Estoy orgullosa de estar junto a todos ustedes y promover una televisión responsable y con valores. Gracias por el honor de dirigirme a ustedes el día de hoy y que Dios nos siga bendiciendo.
Thank you, Ms. Cortez. Thank you so much also for your hopeful words. I have to think that there are just a lot of people in the world that have given up on the Korean Peninsula. And I think that people still need to have that optimism and that hope that there is a way through to untangle this Gordian knot that has been around for 70 years. You mentioned the importance of the media to build to build bridges and not build walls. And I think that that is indeed one of the tasks that healthy media, freedom-loving media can do, because that is in everybody's best interest. And I want to mention that I heard separately during this panel that VOS TV has signed a memorandum of understanding with IMAP. This is being done around the world as media companies sign a non-binding but live document that says we are aligned with IMAP in its goals for media reform, for credibility, for building bridges, and for just lifting up the whole industry of media as a role that can build peace around the world. So this it concludes our presentations, and I see that there are a few questions. I would like to start with one that talks about cell phones in the Koreas. Apparently, North Korea has widespread use of cell phones, but they only work within North Korea. Is there anything that South Korea or any other people can do to basically flip the switch and allow North Koreans to communicate outside their country? And it's open to the floor, whoever would like to comment on that.
I'd be happy to make a comment on this.
Thank you.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes, this is Guy Taylor. I have actually written about this and covered it. There are a couple of organizations in Seoul and in the United States that work very hard. There's one called Free North Korea Radio that works very hard at projecting radio broadcasts into North Korea, and one of the ways, and getting messages in and out of North Korea by communicating via cell phone with North Koreans who have cell phones that can connect to cell towers on the Chinese side of the China-North Korea border. There's not a lot of support for this from the South Korean government at the moment. In the past, there has been more support. The Park Geun-hye government most recently was more supportive of it. The Moon Jae-in government has kind of tried to push back against this type of activity because the North Korean regime is very intolerant of it. And one of the reasons it's so difficult to get messaging coming out of North Korea is that if you are a North Korean who engages in that type of activity, the likelihood of being punished by the government is very high. So, but this idea that digital communications proliferation and cell phone proliferation into North Korea could be a game changer in the way the media landscape or the social media landscape or the communications landscape is organized. That's definitely been a hope for a while, but we haven't seen that much change. There are people in the civil society around the world of sort of North Korea watchers who think that that in fact the proliferation of cell phones in North Korea has enhanced the public's knowledge of the outside world in the last 10 or 15 years. And a lot of people who promote this idea also promote the idea that the North Korean people may be more prime now than ever before to engage in some sort of revolutionary pushback against the government in Pyongyang. I don't think that that's necessarily true, and I think that North Korea so uniquely continues. It's not entirely unique, but it's one of very few countries around the world that continues to operate in a very isolated space, communication space. And I also think the fact that its big neighbor is China. You got the DMZ between North and South, where in the South you've got this real large amount of free communications, free media. But in the Chinese space, you have this authoritarian control over the space as well. So a lot of things there, and I hope I answered some of the question. Those were just some thoughts.
That's right. And it's really it's very enticing to think that somehow technology would help us get to the people that are holding the technology. Do we have other speakers that would like to respond to this issue? Okay. Is Mr. McDivitt still with us? I see he's okay, because I know he had to leave early or going to leave early. Do you have a comment?
I'm right here.
Okay.
Right here, yeah. Well, sure. And one major issue in terms of opening up North Korea is the information flow. Cell phones, as Guy Taylor mentioned, is critical. An author by the name of Dr. Julian Bake studied at Harvard and Oxford and did a book on the hidden revolution of North Korea, where she documents that profusely over the last 10 years. And the number of cell phones, the usage of cell phones is growing quite a bit in the millions. Of course, the signals are controlled, but that's coming in primarily from China. Also, the flow of USB drives and DVDs and culture programming from South Korea, Korea dramas, pop culture has had quite a bit of influence from what I've seen. I think it's an area that the whole free world needs to help support of opening up information flow. And that's something too, I think that Dr. Jenkins and Congressman Dan Burton with the International Association of Parliamentarians for Peace are working on throughout the world of calling out Kim Jong-un to into the international community with applying pressure to pull North Korea into that more space of free exchange of information. I think it's absolutely vital.
Okay, very good. Do we have any other speakers that wanted to address this? Otherwise, we'll move on. Well, thank you. We have a question from the audience, basically noticing that when the Berlin Wall fell and the two parts of Germany were reunited, some outcomes weren't what people were hoping for. So the question is, what kind of good results do you think we could expect with reunification of North and South Korea? So good results that we could expect to see. What do you think?
I'm happy to start with this one as well, if you want.
Thank you. Sure.
Yeah, I mean, I think one of the ones that, particularly as the diplomatic sort of détente, if we could call it that, happened during the Trump administration in Washington, and these historic meetings between Kim Jong-un and Donald Trump, you know, while they haven't really led to anything lasting, and talks are stalled now again. North Korea continuing to illegally pursue nuclear weapons and whatnot. At the moment of excitement around the diplomacy, 2018, 2019, there was suddenly an awareness, I think, in the human species, in the media globally. There was this awareness that in fact this endless crisis, this like multi-generational crisis, could be solved, and if it was solved, what would the real change be? And it would be economic development that wouldn't just impact North Korea and South Korea and China and Japan, but it could impact the entire world. We did an article. I did an article from the region about the theoretical idea of being able to drive from Tokyo, Japan, all the way to Europe if there were a tunnel that you could drive, that somehow trade routes would open all the way from the southern tip of the Korean Peninsula up to Russia and across to Europe, that all of this economic development would happen. So that, I think, is the long-term positive. Of course, it's totally hypothetical. I think on the more immediate front, and I'll wrap this up very quickly here, is the idea that there are still people alive on Earth that have family on one side that wants to communicate with family on the other. And while that's something that I don't think that's going to go away, given that there are 30,000 or so North Koreans living in South Korea, defectors, or so to speak, and that they have family in the North that they can't see. And the immediate front is this idea of just, even if you didn't have a full-scale unification and single government on the Korean Peninsula, if you had some kind of basic unification that would allow for family visits and basic diplomacy and normalization of relations, that would be a tremendous step forward culturally and politically for the whole peninsula.
Very good.
3 o'clock.
Thank you. I want to do, do we have another comment on that? Okay. I would like to pull the question back to media role in peace building, because I know all the speakers addressed and talked about the media is very important. The media is actually part of the bigger solution. The media brings us together. We have information that we share. So with the reunification of North and South Korea, I'm curious, what would be your favorite media role in working in this issue when you can consider environmental discussions about trade, discussions about culture, food, music, technology, water, tourism? I mean, we can pick from a galaxy of issues. Where do you think in your nation, what would be most helpful with the media to begin to thread this idea of a fabric of peace in the Asia-Pacific Korea Peninsula? I'm hoping Dr. Redo will have an answer for that. Our translations, okay. Oh, here we go.
Eu posso falar em português? Eu posso responder em português?
Pode, doutor Sérgio.
A participação da mídia internacional é fundamental em todo e qualquer
Cheryl,
movimento.
I've got a comment. Or can you hear?
Yes, okay, go ahead.
I don't know if the translation is going on. In terms of a couple of issues that could be explored that have been out there for a little while, but never really in depth. One is looking at the 38th parallel, the demilitarized zone, and approaching that as something that Dr. Moon and Mrs. Moon had advocated, as well as others, is making it a peace park. It's a fascinating environmental place where, horticulture and animals have free reign in a way, but opening up the 38th parallel as a place that could be a peace park is a theme that's been put forth. Another one is the location of a new UN office. In fact, the 5th UN office, there is no official UN headquarters or satellite headquarters in the world outside of Asia. I mean, in Asia. There's in New York and in Europe and in Africa. But that's a theme or a topic that would be of great interest. And of course, from the economic perspective, the potential of Korea opening up, as Guy mentioned, if transportation opened up and trade opened up, that would have implications for the Americas. Certainly all of Latin America would stand to benefit from greater trade as well as North America. I think those issues, the DMZ, a UN office, and greater focus on a vision of the Korea Peninsula united from an economic perspective, as our good friend Jim Rogers, the investor, likes to point out, that Korea could be North Korea could be the hottest place on the planet to invest if the DMZ came down and they opened up. I think those are very interesting topics for media to explore. Thanks.
Well, Mr. Echeverria, your background includes work in remote areas of Peru, doing social, assisting as well as working in the media. I wondered, is there a dimension like what you did in Peru that would be relevant to assisting with North Korea reunification?
Eu posso me manifestar? É possível? Sérgio Redó, aqui de São Paulo, do Brasil.
Efectivamente, sí, creo que la unión de las Coreas traería mucho beneficio. Corea del Sur tiene el doble de habitantes que Corea del Norte, tiene una tecnología muy amplia. Tiene también Corea del Sur una gran ventaja en los adelantos tecnológicos, con Corea del Norte se podría complementar para que esa unión haga una fuerza y sea una potencia increíble de Corea, una de las grandes potencias de esta unión. Los beneficios serían muy importantes, beneficios tanto para Corea del Norte como para Corea del Sur.
Correct, because as we know North Korea has been completely devastated by famine multiple times.
Very glad
So
to get to travel with Tony Blair and to work with Angela Merkel, to get to know Bibi Netanyahu right when he left the UN and to know him for 2 decades. Vicente Fox down in Mexico. Mr. Gingrich, there is nobody like you, as people out here know. And I'm going to just do 2 stories.
Okay.
If I didn't do it, I'd be angry.
So do we have any more questions? I've been looking.
Which is a nice backdrop. It's a little bit nicer than what you got behind you, although I do like that light. It has that.
Eu gostaria de responder, porque eu fui instado a responder, eu gostaria. É possível? Sérgio Redó, aqui de São Paulo, do Brasil.
I own this place, and I have the most
Excellent.
Pois não, eu estava falando da importância da mídia no sentido da unificação entre a Coreia do Sul e a Coreia do Norte. Por quê? Não só os esforços diplomáticos que estão sendo empenhados, inclusive até na colocação do último encontro do presidente Donald Trump com o presidente coreano, e que já houve um passo fundamental nesse sentido, mas, na verdade, a mídia é fundamental. Penso que um trabalho que seja feito através dos grandes veículos de comunicação, e aí me permita, Mr. Tom McDavid, o Washington Times teria aí um fundamental trabalho em função de que os Estados Unidos, sem sombra de dúvida, como sendo a mais importante e a mais poderosa nação do mundo, em que pese, não é? Hoje a política externa estar direcionada num outro sentido, mas, fundamentalmente, o esforço concentrado das mídias, principalmente partindo dos Estados Unidos, que evocaria aí uma força à Europa, e inclusive havendo uma sinergia fundamental para a Ásia, e aí atingindo a Coreia do Sul e a Coreia do Norte, haveria de dar um processo de antecipação dessa união. E, sem sombra de dúvida, veja, eu, inclusive, no meu discurso, deixei claramente, a união não é benquista e não é nem vivida pelos coreanos do Norte, com toda a opressão que eles passam lá, mas isso não tem a menor significado dentro desse processo. E eu não tenho dúvida que a Coreia do Sul, o desenvolvimento que ela teve, inclusive agora em 2019, estivemos lá a convite da própria UPF e vimos a força com que a população, a empatia com que o povo coreano, em que pese todas as tradições orientais, mas tem para conosco os turistas e principalmente os brasileiros. E eu tenho certeza que essa união traria extremo benefício ao mundo inteiro, uma vez que a desunião entre a Coreia do Sul e a Coreia do Norte representa, inclusive, um retrocesso econômico-financeiro para o mundo. Veja a repercussão que teria a união da Coreia do Sul com a Coreia do Norte nas bolsas de valores. Veja, eu tenho certeza que com um trabalho dessa natureza, próprio Japão haveria um benefício estupendo à medida que a China tem, na verdade, provocado sempre a Ásia através das Coreias e, principalmente, esse assodamento, né, e esse temor que a Coreia do Sul e o Japão têm da Coreia do Norte em razão das relações bélicas e internacionais com a China. Portanto, eu penso que, sem sombra de dúvida, até me permita, já concluindo, a grande, não é, World Peace, não é, sonhada por Reverendo Moon, não é, teria aí uma possibilidade fundamental de começar esse trabalho, não é, integrando a Ásia com a Europa para depois vir formar com a América, não é, a oportunidade, óbvio, respeitando todos os processos lineares dos oceanos, mas hoje tudo isso é fantástico e de forma tranquila de fazer, visto a própria ligação no canal da Mancha, não é? Onde tem ali hoje uma aproximação econômico-financeira entre a França e a Inglaterra, com uma totalidade de trânsito de passageiros e de produtos e de mercadoria. Portanto, eu acho que realmente é tudo que possa desejar, todos nós, inclusive dentro da nossa filosofia de paz e de união, não é? Pensando sempre em Deus, a possibilidade desta unificação entre a Coreia do Sul e a Coreia do Norte. É o que eu tenho a dizer. Muito obrigado pela participação.
Okay. Thank you very much. I forgot to mention one more aspect of media and peace building that I'm sorry I forgot, because it is the world of sports. We have had great success through the Olympics and international sports activities with China and North Korea. That is, like, sports is the one, like baseball or soccer, football. It pulls the world together. And I failed to mention that in the list of potential platforms for peace building, especially because, as we know, sports heavily involves the media. There's a million stories at a big sporting event. What are the thoughts on the media role using sports as a vehicle to break through the barriers?
Eu posso falar? Sérgio Redor, aqui de São Paulo, Brasil. Nós temos um exemplo fundamental, fantástico, através do nosso atleta do século, não é? Cidadão do mundo, que foi Edson Arantes do Nascimento, o Pelé. O Pelé fez com que houvesse o interrompimento de uma guerra, não é? A vida na Arábia Saudita, se não me falha a memória, em uma apresentação do Santos Futebol Clube na década de 60. E também, da mesma forma, ele conseguiu, não é, em países como o caso de Israel, não é, com um conflito tremendo com a Palestina, e quando da visita do Pelé, houve também uma aproximação importante nesse sentido, e todos os países do mundo em que ele esteve. Acho até que mesmo ele debilitado, não é, eu poderia, e através aí dos nossos queridos líderes aqui do Brasil, não é, o doutor Simão Faraboli, como o nosso presidente também aqui de São Paulo,
Very good.
o Koichi Sasaki, pastor Koichi Sasaki, nós podemos tentar um contato com o Edson Arantes do Nascimento, a quem eu tenho um bom relacionamento, inclusive já tive algumas parcerias com a empresa dele. Eu posso tentar falar com ele para que ele se motive, não é, dentro desse processo. Até, eu acho o seguinte, um pronunciamento do Pelé, você veja agora, né, que ele completou 80 anos, o mundo inteiro se curvou, não é? Houve até, eu acredito que os senhores aí, e principalmente o próprio jornal, né, o Washington Times, e tantos outros grandes veículos de comunicação internacional, publicaram, né, o aniversário do Pelé. E a FIFA fez um grande vídeo internacional, aliás, até, olha que coisa interessante, unindo todos os países continentes, que, por incrível que pareça, a ONU, a Organização Nacional, a Organização das Nações Unidas, ela tem 187 países, não é? Veja, filiados, 187 países. Veja que nós temos 190 e a FIFA tem 223 países filiados, não é? Então, óbvio que são pequenas ilhas, são reinados, condados, não é? Na Ásia e na Oceania, mas, no fundo, são países também reconhecidos pela FIFA. E, inclusive, tem competição, time de futebol e tudo mais. Eu penso que o futebol, sim, poderia ser, sem sombra de dúvida, uma grande... Quer dizer, o esporte em geral, mas tem o vôlei, tem o basquete, tem o tênis, né? Mas ainda que é um esporte muito mais elitista, mas eu acho que o futebol une os povos nesse sentido. É a minha opinião.
Wonderful. Yeah, I like sports diplomacy. I think there's a lot of opportunities there. Did any of our other speakers wish to talk about this idea of, using different vehicles, topics, and issues for the media to encourage peace building and the reunification of North and South Korea? Is there anything else we've missed? Okay.
Cheryl, I can jump in with one final point.
Okay, because we are
pick up on something that Guy had mentioned earlier, and we've all talked about it. It's kind of an obvious intention is to hold a world summit or to hold a media conference in Pyongyang. We did this during the Cold War, where Reverend and Mrs. Moon, through the World Media Association, held a major conference for a couple thousand journalists in Moscow. And Larry Moffat, who works closely, the Secretary General of UPF, together with his colleagues, were organizing that. That's something that I think would be a fabulous project. And with the IMAP network and the IPP network and the UPF network around the world, I think that's something that an invitation to Kim Jong-un to open the door for that. It would be in the benefit. It would be to the betterment and the benefit of the people of North Korea. So I would recommend that IMAP take that on as a project, Guy, and we begin exploring it and building momentum, build some traction around the concept. I know it would be fascinating to hear Dr. Hak Jahan Moon give a plenary address in North Korea, being a North Korean, and having come out of it and built this global network, that would make big news. And I would recommend that we kind of come to closure on this conference with that vision in mind. And every country that's represented on this call, especially the great nations of Brazil and Nicaragua and the others, El Salvador and Honduras and Canada and America, there's a lot we can do from the Western Hemisphere. So let's commit to work together with IMAP. I know Dr. Jenkins is on the call too, and there's a lot we can do together. So
Very good.
back to you, Cheryl.
Thank you. I'd like to thank all of our panelists for taking some time out today. I really appreciate the ability of folks to target this particular problem in this particular part of the world. And I want to thank Mr. Echeverria for coming in from Peru, and Dr. Redo from Brazil, and our lovely Mrs. Cortez from Nicaragua, Mr. Taylor from the newsroom, the Times, and Mr. McDivitt from the Times. Thank you so much for being a part of this panel. I hope we've answered some questions and raised more. To be part of IMAP, I saw there was one question about that. You would go to upf.org, and IMAP has its own section of the website there as well. So thank you very much, and we are adjourned.
Bye.
Congratulations. Thank you very much.
All welcome.
Muchísimas gracias. Muito obrigado. Thank you so much for all the panel and MC. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thanks, Reverend Chin.
Thank you, McDavid.
Thanks, Cheryl.
Thank
Welcome.
you. Welcome. Bye-bye.
Oh, thank you.
Hasta luego. Hasta luego.
Gracias, Senor Walter. Gracias.
Gracias.
Very good.
What?
Okay.
I wish we could have a Korean lunch now, Reverend Shin.
Now it's 4:21 a.m.
Oh, you're in Korea, that's right.
Yeah, ahora está